His views on the most important geopolitical issue of our age are known to all. He supports the upholding of resolutions to stop the Israeli occupation of Palestine and has campaigned against what he calls Israeli war crimes in Gaza. Unlike his rivals, President-elect Donald Trump said in the March GOP primaries in Florida that he would be neutral on Palestine-Israel. But his position, like on other issues, appears to be shifting. Joining me from New York City in a cab is Rabbi Shmuley Boteach, who, like Trump, is arguably funded by Sheldon Adelson, the American casino magnate. Rabbi Shmuley, welcome back to the show. First of all, you've hailed Donald Trump's what you call unimaginable toughness. Do you think he'll support his policy to ally with Russia to wipe out the Islamists of Syria?
I think that he understands that Islamist terrorism is a threat to Western civilization. Now, he campaigned on that promise. I expect him to deliver on that promise. But I don't think that's particularly controversial. I think most Western democracies feel that way, especially after the attacks in Paris, Belgium, et cetera.
Yeah, but he was very keen to say that President Obama's policy has been an utter failure in Syria, that the American backing for these so-called moderate rebels in Syria was highly questionable. Who are the Americans actually funding? Trump appeared to be saying in the campaign that imply that they were al-Qaeda linked or ISIS-Daesh linked.
Who supports ISIS? I don't know anyone that supports ISIS. ISIS is a death cult. ISIS is a decapitating, bloodthirsty death cult. The West has to unite against ISIS. I think they're trying to unite against ISIS. I think most Americans are not happy with the way the United States has fought the war on ISIS because it's been highly ineffective. Now, there's been gains against ISIS in Mosul, and Americans have followed that with moderate interest because it came at the height of the presidential election. But it's going to have to be stepped up because ISIS is bringing global jihad to Western cities.
Of course, the controversy was that President Obama, along with the British government, has been supporting moderate rebels who've been allied to ISIS-Daesh, and it's been Russia and other powers that have been trying to wipe out ISIS-Daesh in Syria. Israel, for instance, has long tried to overthrow the government of Syria. So, ironically, the goals of ISIS-Daesh in Syria are the same as ISIS-Daesh.
You can't say that there aren't issues with the Syrian government. I mean, you're not seriously portraying the Syrian government as some sort of moral entity. They have used poison gas against children. They have bombed their own people in Aleppo. The problem with Syria, it's difficult to find the good guy. But
there's obviously been lots of controversy about that, even about admissions on that. But Trump has been so clear that he wants to work, apparently, or maybe just allow Russia to get on with the job because he believes the Obama policy, which, after all, was allied to Israeli policy, has been failing.
I think that most people wanted to see real American support for moderate rebels. I don't think President Obama really provided it. He certainly didn't institute a no-fly zone. You and I we probably do disagree on Syria policy. I know that Russia did support the government of Assad, but that's very morally problematic. I mean, Assad was bombing his own people. Why isn't that morally problematic?
So you'd rather support forces allied to ISIS-Daesh than support the Assad government?
You know, like I said, it's a choice between two very bad options. But if Russia does have this influence over Assad, which it seems that it does, why can't they stop the bombing of civilians? The bombing of Aleppo is a humanitarian catastrophe. Now, you seem to be painting this image that if you don't support Assad, who has murdered his own people, you're automatically supporting ISIS. No, I don't think that it's that cut and dry. I don't think it's that binary. I think that there was always the opportunity to support moderate rebels, albeit it's difficult to know how moderate they're going to remain, how moderate they truly are. I am not saying there isn't a moral quagmire in Syria. I am saying that the position of simply supporting Assad, who is slaughtering his people, is extremely morally problematic. But to link Israel to this, you're the first person I've heard to really bring Israel into the equation.
Well, there were famous pictures of Netanyahu on the Golan Heights, after all. But I mean, look, talk about Trump.
But you don't want to give the Golan Heights to ISIS, do you? They're the ones who would dominate the region if Israel was to withdraw. Do you seriously suggest that ISIS should become the government of the Golan Heights?
I don't think that's quite the issue. I've got to say, Trump wants to talk with Putin, obviously.
Yeah,
The relations between Moscow and Washington were appalling. I think most of the world would agree. And part of those negotiations will obviously be based on certainly the Russian government's idea that the moderate rebels you speak of are not moderate at all. Do you welcome that rapprochement between Moscow and Washington?
Well, the rapprochement with Russia is an interesting dilemma for most Americans, and we can have an honest discussion about this even on Russia Today. Now, let me speak to you as a Jew about this for a moment. On the one hand, the Jewish community of Russia seems to truly respect and admire Vladimir Putin. He has been extremely kind to the Jewish community of Russia, and this is after centuries of anti-Semitism, let us recall. The chief rabbi of Russia, who I know is very close to Vladimir Putin, they praise Putin constantly. Putin donated a month of his salary to the building of the Jewish Museum in Russia, which is itself, the existence of a Jewish museum in Moscow is, after all the anti-Semitism, the pogroms of hundreds of years, the mass slaughter of Jews, is an incredible thing. And let us also not forget that amidst that history of anti-Semitism, this is quite remarkable, it was the Russians who fought Hitler from the east, and it was the Russians who liberated Auschwitz ultimately. On the other hand, there's a very long history of anti-Semitism in Russia. But the Jewish community of Russia loves Vladimir Putin, and they respect him highly. It's quite remarkable. I'm talking about even very religious rabbis with beards and yarmulkes. On the other hand, Putin is selling advanced missile technology to countries like Iran that would make it nearly impossible, should Iran violate the nuclear agreement, which they already are, make it almost impossible to attack their nuclear installations because of this advanced missile technology. So Putin sends mixed signals. I think Americans agree that working together to fight ISIS is essential. But Americans have real questions about Putin. And I'm not sure that Putin has made an effort to explain himself, if there is something to be explained, because most Americans see him rolling back the democratic march that Russia was on after the fall of the Soviet Union. I hosted Mikhail Gorbachev at Oxford right after the dissolution of the Soviet Union. He gave a very inspiring speech about how he believed in democracy. Americans are not sure that Putin is committed to that. This comes even before the annexation of Crimea and what was rejected by the international community. So on the one hand, this is a political earthquake here in the United States. The new American president-elect said he wants...
To which, of course, a lot of people say, well, it's none of America's business. But I got to just get on to another topic. We're going to move on. I know that taxi will eventually reach a destination. Did it alarm you when Trump said that he would be neutral on Israel-Palestine? What was your reaction when you heard him say that in the Miami GOP primary debate?
No, he explained it afterward. He said that he meant that he's not going to pressure Israel, that he's going to be neutral insofar as he's not going to insert himself constantly with the kind of pressure that the Obama administration has exerted on Israel to pursue policies that are inimical to their interests and that would undermine Israeli security.
What are you hearing about the status of Jerusalem under President Trump?
Donald Trump committed to move the American embassy, which is currently in a semi-dilapidated building in Tel Aviv, to the eternal capital of the Jewish people in Jerusalem. And that was already a bill passed by Congress under Newt Gingrich when he was Speaker, albeit with a presidential waiver. Twice a year, the president has to actually sign saying that he invokes the waiver in order for the embassy not to be moved, because American law now, passed by both houses of Congress, is that the embassy should be there. We expected that President Trump will move it, as is right. I mean, if you're talking about Russia, their capital is Moscow. That's where the American embassy is. It's not in Leningrad. And it's not in some other city. The same thing is true of the American embassy in Paris. You know, it's not in Marseille. The American embassy should be in Jerusalem and not in Tel Aviv.
Well, we're going to get the views of the Palestinian ambassador about that later in the week. I just got to ask you one final question. What do you think about the reaction to the death of Leonard Cohen? He infamously opposed the boycott over alleged war crimes of Israel, played in Israel, broke the boycott along with famously Madonna, Rihanna, Paul McCartney, and others. But Leonard Cohen vindicated, certainly, as all the people around the world remembering him for his music, but also not talking about the boycott against Israel.
There should be no boycott against the Middle East's only democracy, the only country in the Middle East where Arabs enjoy full rights. They don't enjoy them in Riyadh. They don't enjoy them in the United Arab Emirates or Kuwait. It's only in Israel. That's the remarkable thing. I miss Leonard Cohen. I loved his beautiful, whispery voice. Hallelujah is one of the most beautiful songs, perhaps, composed perhaps in all human history. It's been re-recorded by hundreds of artists. It's a sad day to have him lost. And I salute all of the artists who go to the Jewish state, who show solidarity with the Jewish people, but more importantly, show solidarity with Israeli Arab citizens, of which there are 1.5 million. Israel, you're speaking to me from Britain. Israel has as many Muslim citizens in a population of 7 million that Britain has with a population of 80 million. And they enjoy full human rights, and that's why everyone should support Israel. But I always enjoy our conversations. I always find that amidst our disagreements, there isn't serious rancor, and that you give me the opportunity to speak, and I appreciate it. And I think we could all agree that the humanitarian catastrophe in Syria needs to be resolved. And if President-elect Trump can work with President Putin to immediately solve that I think is one of the international community's highest priorities, because people really are suffering.
Rabbi Shmuley Boteach, I think there's a plane waiting for you. Probably see you quite soon here in the studio. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.